And then let's get to some Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. And it comes off of what Mike just said about Myles Garrett being reinstated by the NFL. It raises a couple of questions. I think people remember that it was an indefinite suspension. We now know that the term indefinite means 6 games in this instance. So it's a 6-game suspension. Also of note, Myles did meet with the commissioner a couple of days ago. So we don't know sort of what that meeting was like. And
I'm sorry. I'm sure it was. I'm sorry. It'll never happen again. I was wrong. You were right. You're good looking. I'm not. You know, the whole thing.
I'm just trying to present both sides. I'll say it. To me, it felt like the suspension was short. I thought it was going to be longer than 6 games. But now we know. We have this definitive statement. The thing that I keep going back to, though, is if the name on that quarterback's jersey had been Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady or Ben Roethlisberger, would it have been 6 games? And so that's the precedent now set if it ever happens, God forbid, again.
I think it's interesting looking at this because I think the use of indefinite was more a precautionary measure, right? Like, we were all a little thrown off because we really don't see things like this happen very often. And I know we had the example of someone doing it towards Richie Incognito, but we haven't seen it connect like this. And that's just a difference in this situation. And so the indefinite use, and we were talking about this before the show, was smart because it gave you time to sort of step back and say, all right, let's take a deep breath. There are people calling for him to get arrested, people tweeting assault and stuff like that. But we've got to get through that period and go, all right, what do we need to do? We need to make sure that this guy wasn't on the field for the rest of the 2019 season. And that was the priority. And the indefinite was definitely to make sure, hey, if the Browns, who have an outside chance at a playoff run, get there, we are not going to have him on the field there. Right. And it could have been longer. But now you kind of got backed into this place where, all right, the NFL, and I'm sure time-wise, it's felt like it's been a long time. Time has passed, but now you have a number attached to it, and we know how complicated it gets when that happens to the NFL.
At some point, there was going to get a number, right? He was going to get reinstated, so eventually we were going to have a number. But the number turned out to be somewhat arbitrary because they did have an outside chance to make the playoffs. So what if they did and lost in the first round? So he'd have been suspended then 7 games. So that would have been the mark. There are some people that said he should have been suspended 8 games. 2 games into the season. So then 8 games would have been the mark. It's whatever number you felt would have been the right number. And the fair question is brought up, what if this happened in week 4? Would he been done for the rest of the season? And would now that first-time offense be a 12-game suspension? I think they did the right thing to say, indefinite, stay off the field, let's everybody calm down, and then let's figure this thing out. And I think that's what they were. That's why it was indefinite. It was because of the possibility of them making the playoffs that they couldn't say 6 games and then he's back for the playoffs. You're done for the rest of the year. You don't make the playoffs at 6 games. You make the playoffs and actually win a couple games. It could be 8 games. Could be 7 games. So they waited to see that. I think everybody thought he was going to be back at the start of this season. So whatever number was put to that, and some people don't think it's enough, and some people think it's just right. But I do think it was kind of an arbitrary thing on when it happened in the season.
Yeah, do you guys think it was enough? Because I think about it like this as we sit here now. If it had happened earlier in the season and they would have said, we're suspending him for the rest of the year, I probably would have gone, okay, I understand that. Yep. And even as I sit here now and they say we're reinstating him and it only turns out to be a 6-game suspension, I go, all right, well, that doesn't bother me a ton either in this situation. And maybe it's colored by the fact that Myles Garrett, this was a total outlier. Outside of, a couple instances, I guess I shouldn't say that, a couple instances leading up where he had late hits, penalties, and things like that maybe.
But he's not Vontaze Perfect.
Yeah,
let's be clear
I guess that's the thing. It's
Perfect.
not the pass like that. I don't know what's making me feel like this.
I thought it would go into next season, and that's something, Stephen A. yesterday on First Take echoed. He thought it would at least go into the beginning of next season. I will say one thing that yesterday, First Take, Your Take, which you can hear on these very airwaves from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern, the listeners pointed out yesterday, and I think there's some validity to it. The advantage to the NFL getting it done now is by coming out and getting this decision made today. They get it made before the scouting combine, before the draft, before OTAs, before the regular season. By the time we get to next season, it'll be a blip on the radar of anybody's attention span going into it. So the NFL effectively buries it on a day where the Astros today are going to get up and speak about cheating. We talked yesterday about how long do these conversations go. The NFL buried this in a way that by the time we get to the regular season, I don't even know that Myles Garrett's suspension
and they
will
should.
Still be part of
there was no reason not to have the meeting now. What longer were you waiting for? I mean, he was out the whole time. The whole postseason went on. We're in the offseason. Why wait? Meet with him, see what he has to say. We kind of know what he's going to have to say, and then decide whether you're going to reinstate him or not. They had to have a number in mind, I would imagine. But it is an interesting thought. What if it happened in week 14? What if it happened in week 12? Would they only been a 4-game? Would they have gone in then to next year? They had to have some kind of gauge of a number in mind.
And it makes you wonder what the baseline was, because if they had gone 2-4 games into the season, would anyone have raised hell over it?
No.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I think we all would have looked at it and gone, it's fine. And so when you look at that, also the difficulty of these things is, and I keep coming back to it because the NFL's had to put a number onto it, when you get to things like domestic violence that have a suspension number in the NFL of a floor, 6 games with room for more or less.
Right.
But when that magic number is 6, and now all of a sudden the next time that happens and it's, well, now I can equate this with that, it always makes for a dicey visual. And so I don't know, but you wonder if something like that is in the back of their minds of, if we suspend this guy for 8, but then someone is accused of some sort of domestic violence or assault,
the minimum
and they're suspended for 6, now all of a sudden you've got a visual that I think we've all learned is pretty hard to tolerate.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube, and for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app, and for premium content plus live streaming, make sure to subscribe to ESPN Player.